I was going to say, whoever has the Coke bottle that's front and center in the camera. This one? No, there it goes.
Yeah.
Oh. Welcome back. This is Senate Finance. We just took a 20-minute break to eat lunch. And we are going to start with S65. And this is one that we have today to take testimony. It has to get voted out of here tomorrow or it dies. So we're going to go through it because tomorrow we have the housing TIF bill to go through, which I'm not sure. I don't think it's as controversial, but it's probably as or more complicated. I don't know what else is in it. So, Ellen, welcome. We haven't seen you in here in a while.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. So I'm here on draft 7.1 that was voted out of
Okay.
Senate Natural Resources. So that was X25.
Okay, we got chairs. We may be reaching our limit. Okay.
So the bill is 22 pages, and you do have a lot of witnesses. So I was wondering how much of a walkthrough you wanted. There's two main parts to this bill. The first 19 pages are about updating the energy efficiency utility statutes, and then the last 3 pages are about repealing the clean heat standard and doing a report on fuel dealers.
Okay, that really is not in our domain. The whole energy efficiency is, the word fee is there. And so I think we will start with that. But Senator Watson has arrived, so I think we will give you about 2 minutes to just tell us what your thoughts were. We're looking at the whole clean energy standard, and I think this whole second half of the bill isn't in our domain. So, but the whole efficiency fee area is. So I gather you were changing the use of the fee, and thus we have the bill.
Yes, that's right. So thank you, Chair of the committee. So just to keep this really brief, the intention of this bill was to align the existing state policy and resources that we have with the important climate work that we need to do, and to take the money that we already are collecting and do more climate work with that. So it doesn't add to the energy burden of Vermonters. So currently 90% of Efficiency Vermont's money, just as an example, is used for electric consumption reduction, despite when the language was introduced, that greenhouse gas reductions was on par or intended to be on par with electric efficiency reductions. So while activities for these technologies might count towards multiple objectives that Efficiency Vermont needs to meet, greenhouse gas reductions is only 5% of their mission as allocated by the PUC. So in addition, low and moderate income folks have a harder time taking advantage of these kinds of technologies and switching over their resources and energy sources or doing efficiency work. And so trying to address that as the problem, this does carve out 25% of Efficiency Vermont's budget, specifically for low and moderate income benefits, and 12.5% for small businesses and nonprofits. Folks that we would hope would be able to take advantage of these kinds of programs. And for the rest, prioritizes greenhouse gas reductions as the highest priority. The other objectives don't go away. It just shifts the focus and while being still subject to least cost payment. It does fix the budget for the money collected by the electric efficiency charge. It does include an adjustment for inflation, But we put that in there to try to make it clear that we're not attempting to increase the charge or increase that part of the budget. So the electric efficiency charge, just to go a little bit more detail about that. This, I'm sure you'll hear more about this from others, but simply put, the electric efficiency charge is calculated every year by taking the PUC's approved budget and then dividing it by the electric load. So this bill affects both sides of that equation. First, it fixes that EBT budget as it's collected from the electric efficiency use charge. And then that amount will not grow except for inflation, as it's stated in the bill. And then with increased priority given to climate work, we're likely to see more beneficial electrification, things like heat pumps or EVs. And so that electric load is projected to grow in more so than it might otherwise because of this bill. And so that just for reference, residential electric efficiency charges rates have dropped 21% since 2018, and that trend is likely to continue under this bill. It's likely that you'll hear testimony about the impact that this bill may have on electric rates. And while I think that is outside the scope necessarily of why this bill is referred here, I think it's fair to say that the results of this shift would happen from the results of the shifts that would happen from this bill. There are some reasons why there may be a reduction in downward pressure, mainly from reduced efficiency work. There may also be reasons why we may see an increase in downward pressure on rates, namely from more electrification. So just to wrap up, by shifting to the prioritization of efficiency Vermont's work to greenhouse gas reduction, we'll likely see more electrification work being done. And between that and simultaneously fixing the Efficiency Vermont budget from the electric efficiency charge, that should result in reduced electric efficiency charge rate over time. Right. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm going to look to Ellen for correction, but my memory is my first year in this building, the major bill was deregulation, electric deregulation. And we heard from the people from the Great Rivers Dam the other day in Bellows Falls that Vermont was the one state where we had not deregulated our electric grid. And this grew out of it. Vermont had the highest electric rates at one point in New England, and New England has the highest electric rates in the country. And as a realtor, I could not give away a house with electric heat, and it was cost. There was a lot of conversion to natural gas. So the goal was to lower consumption, which lowered the amount we had to buy during peak hours when power is most expensive. I'm remembering this all correctly, and the efficiency grew out of that effort. The amount they got was based on the usage and how much less electricity we used. Since then, we have developed significant resources in renewable energy and battery storage. And now with climate change, we are trying to move people onto electricity, which will up the usage. And so the question is how do we adjust? How do we adjust? How do we, work at climate emissions? Because right now they can't help you replace your oil boiler with a more efficient oil boiler, unless it's a heat pump furnace. And I think there's a house, there's a way you can do that. It's expensive, and depending on what your plumbing wiring is like in your house. It can be very expensive. So I think that's what this is growing out of, is how do we go? There were promises made, I don't know in writing, when we did the efficiency charge, because your electric bills are high, were probably higher then, maybe not, we didn't have all the electronics, believe it or not, 20 years ago. That we would keep this on electricity. We have since then done some trials to allow it to go to other climate change. So I think I've got that right. That's how we got here. And Ellen, so tell us what the next step is. And we are over our allowed limit. My enforcer tells me it's significantly over the limit. I'm not going to enforce it, but I'm going to make you all sign a release that if you get something, we'll sue us.
Madam Chair, we could create more room to keep the committee out of the room.
That, we could meet in the hall. Okay, Ellen. It's going to get worse. Be glad you're not in here on Friday.
I know. Ellen, so once again, Ellen Tchaikovsky out the Legislative Council. So section 1 of the bill amends 30 VSA.
And this goes on your, can you share your screen? There may be people at home. It is on the committee.
So, all of section 1 is amending 209, which is the statute where the efficiency programs are established. So the efficiency utilities. And so all 19 pages are the language related to that. So starting on page 1, I'm going to try to go a little bit fast.
Yes, because we have a lot of.
You do. So starting on page 1, first, it's amending the subheading. It's energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions reduction. It's adding further down on the page that the commission shall propose, develop, and solicit and monitor energy efficiency and conservation programs and measures, including electrification. And so adding the reference to electrification
has been added.
I got it. All right. So has been added a few other places in here.
Okay.
Because previously, as you mentioned, the goal was to reduce electric usage, but as you switch off of fossil fuels, you are electrifying, which does not inherently reduce the amount of electricity used. So that has been added in multiple places throughout this section. A new sentence is added down in line 18. Any programs and measures supporting efficient use of biological and fossil-based fuels shall meet the applicable air quality standards from ANR.
It's a biological fuel wood.
Yes.
It's a new term. Okay. Yes. All right.
On to page 2. Such programs and measures and their implementation may be approved by the commission if they determine they will be beneficial toward the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and beneficial to consumers or the ratepayers of the company after notice and hearings. So again, this is the first time we're adding specific reference to the beneficial towards reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Previously, it has really been focused on efficiency.
And in the past, right now, it's the amount of money they get to spend is equal to or it's tied to the amount of electricity we don't use, correct? And we do get a payment for
We do get payment from reducing, bidding into the forward capacity market, our saving. I'm gonna defer on exactly how the budget is set by the PUC, but I think you can hear more about that
We
from
will hear
either
about that.
the
Okay.
Department or Efficiency Vermont. So still on page 2, again, a reference to, the specific programs. So adding efficiency, conservation, and electrification programs. On page 3, the commission shall provide for coordinated development, implementation, and monitoring of cost-effective efficiency and conservation programs to thermal energy and process fuel customers by one or more entities. So it's striking reference to the whole building basis to allow some flexibility in case they have outbuildings or parts of their the entity that may be outside of the building envelope itself. So like for commercial entities that may have something outside of the building envelope, they've struck that reference here.
Processed fuel customers. Are we again talking fossil and biological fuel?
So process fuel is actually defined on line 9. So the process fuel has always been part of this program. It's we've added a definition here that says that process fuel means the fuel used in commercial and industrial production operations. So we're not talking about the
okay.
heating of the building.
How it's used, not it's made.
Yes. And so much of this bill talks about electric efficiency in the usage, but then in the thermal part, talking about heating a building. But some of the funding does go to process fuel efficiency also, which is about the production and the types of fuel used there.
Okay. We did do. There was this cardboard box manufacturing up in a very economically challenged section of this state. And we did do a program with the energy efficiency charged because
Efficiency can come from different parts of the building.
yeah,
Yep.
they could not use electric to do what they needed to do. And we really needed 250 high-wage jobs in that section of the state.
So part of this bill is also looking at, we currently have electric efficiency, and then we have this other pot, which is thermal and process fuel efficiency. Those two things have largely been used together, and it's a different pot of money primarily, and this bill is going to combine those.
And that was a trial program. We extended it because they couldn't complete it because of COVID, and we actually haven't heard. It's probably time to check in on that. Because it should be.
I think we did put it in statute last year.
We did.
I think we did. I think we did check it.
We did.
And we did, yes. And sorry, I just lost internet connection. I'll get the share back up. All right, so at the bottom of page 3, a slightly different topic. So this is adding reference now to the efficiency utilities working on RVs and CVs. So the appointed entity may be used to support the attainment of building energy codes established in section 51 and 53 of this title. That's the residential building energy standards and the commercial building energy standards respectively. We call them the RVs and CVs. The commission shall review and approve a methodology for the appointed entities to support the attainment of code in the next demand resources planning proceeding. The commission is authorized to approve methodology for the appointed entity in the state to quantify energy savings achieved through code attainment, which shall be counted towards the appointed entity's quantitative savings targets. Currently, there is no, while we have adopted building energy codes for the last 20-ish years, there isn't an agency currently enforcing those codes. And so while they are required, oversight of them is a little patchy. And so this is an effort to have the energy efficiency utilities be involved in that and then to allow them to count it as part of their program. Next, as Senator Watson mentioned,
Somebody who's looking for No. Lyle? No?
And I'm losing internet again. I guess I don't have Wi-Fi in here, so I might lose my screen again, but the annual, I'm on page 4 still. Line of 7, the annual revenue required to be raised by the electric efficiency charge authorized under this subsection D shall be equivalent to the inflation adjusted commission approved electric efficiency budget in 2026. So as Senator Watson mentioned, this is to tell the PUC that this is not intended to increase or decrease the current electric efficiency charge, but to set it at what is currently set for 2026.
Okay. But I think that kind of things. That's this year.
For next
Yeah,
year's approved
but
budget, yeah.
It does get altered. Now, up and down. It's not
Yes,
static.
yes, currently it's not static.
Okay.
How is it determined now?
I'm gonna pass on that question.
Okay, we'll get, I'm sure, testimony.
Yeah.
See, the PUC is here. I have a windowsill back here.
A little bit here.
So next goes into the efficiency charge. So the commission may establish the charge that meets the requirements of 218C, release cost planning, with priority consideration given to the greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and then the due consideration to the energy policy. So again, adding reference with priority to greenhouse gas emissions reductions. They're changing the name to from the electric efficiency fund to the just efficiency fund. That changes the name a few places. And then on page 5, so page
Can I
5.
ask a question on page 4 regarding that charge board? Makes reference to the inflation adjusted charge for 2026. Does this suggest or imply or mean that as this continues, it will be annually adjusted, or is this a one-time?
So the efficiency budget is set in 3-year increments. But this is setting it in the future to be a static budget. So it'll be reviewed every 3 years.
Is it a static budget each year, or is there an inflation adjustment? That's what I'm really asking for. So it's making reference to the inflation adjusted charge in 2026.
I think when they do the budgeting process every 3 years, they would look at what in the inflation adjusted budget was in 2026. But
I think
also
that may be one of the issues we're going to be asked to look at.
yeah, I would also maybe defer. So then on section 5, there on page 5, this new subdivision 4, this language occurs already in the statute, but it's being moved here. This list of supplemental funding being moved here is changing the dividing line. So previously, the electric efficiency charge has gone to funding electric efficiency. These other forms of funding, the forward capacity market and RGGI, those funds have previously gone to thermal and process fuel efficiency. So now moving those funding sources so that they are commingled. So this language is existing language. It's just being used as part of the sort of ability to reallocate those funds for the types of programs. And I can read it if you'd like. I'm having internet. I don't have internet again. But I mean, I have one print. I didn't know if the chair. So the first one is the forward capacity savings that are generated by the forward capacity market.
Okay, but the forward capacity is based on electric usage, right?
Yes.
Okay,
But currently those funds are used for thermal and
for
process.
thermal, yes,
So they're moved between,
to this.
Yeah.
Group, yeah,
And then on page 6, the net revenues from the carbon credits from the cap and trade program, that's the RGGI dollars. Those are also currently in statute, but going towards the thermal and process fuel. And then any other monies appropriated, they will be deposited into the efficiency fund.
So the Reggie and the forward capacity are already being used. These aren't new funds.
Correct.
We're adding to that the possibility that some of the energy efficient charge on your electric bill would be added to those to do thermal
Yeah.
efficiency.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't share my screen. It's not.
That's okay.
Yeah. So,
Last year, all they told me was I had to connect and reconnect.
yeah.
Because mine would blank out 3 times in an afternoon.
Yeah.
I think the word dark hole was mentioned.
So on page 6, subsection D, so there's language here that's being added. This is language from the EMA program that you alluded to before, which is the Energy Efficiency Modernization Act pilot. And so all of this work relates to that, but it's specifically taking some language that was added to that pilot program and adding it here. And so on page 6, notwithstanding a retail electricity provider that is also an entity, so Burlington Electric, they may use money subject to subsection E and any of the supplemental funding to deliver thermal and transportation measures or programs that reduce fossil fuel use regardless of the pre-existing fuel source of the customer, with special emphasis on measures or programs that take a new or innovative approach to reducing fossil fuel use, including support for staffing necessary to implement innovative building sector policies and modifying or supplementing existing vehicle incentive programs and electric vehicle supply equipment grant programs to incentivize high consumption fuel users, especially individuals using more than 1,000 gallons of gasoline or diesel annually, and those with low and moderate income, to transition to the use of battery electric vehicles. The amounts available shall include amounts annually budgeted for thermal energy and process fuel funds or from supplemental funds, and any carry forward onto page 7. Thermal energy and process fuel funds or supplemental funding from prior periods or programs, measures and services that reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the thermal energy for transportation sector. So this is a pilot program you already authorized them to start doing. So it's for the high consumption users for gasoline primarily, and this is not a source of funding they would have previously been able to use for this funding. So this is moving that from the pilot program into the statute for permanent use.
Okay, so this isn't the pilot we did with the cardboard box.
No, this is a different pilot.
This is a
Yes.
different. Okay, yes, and this was the one we did 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was just last year. Yes, 2 years ago. Yes, 2023.
Okay,
Yes.
and this is only impacts Burlington Electric.
Correct.
Okay. But given that that's a most urban area, that might be a place where electric vehicles are doing most of their quality damage, and since it's not long distances, it might be a place to really push electric vehicles. By driving from the station, you're not 50 miles from home.
All right, so on page 7, line 4, regulated use of the efficiency fund. Balances in the efficiency fund shall be ratepayer funds and be used to support the activities authorized in the subdivision for the reduction of total energy use across all fuel sources. Was that
You're not the enforcer.
Oh, I thought you told me you wanted me to. That's fine. I will relinquish those.
Answer college. It's needed.
I do not think about it, unless someone gets out.
They've all signed releases.
That's right. Tomorrow I'll bring my box of masks.
Total energy use across all fuel sectors without a requirement for proportional allocation of cost or saving for specific fuel types. The balance in the efficiency fund shall be carried forward and remain in the fund to the end of the fiscal year. So there's new language down at the bottom of page 7. So the commission shall establish an appropriate budget for the appointed entity using the efficiency fund. The commission shall consider all revenue sources established under subsection D3 and 4 onto page 8, and limitations on electric revenues established under subsection D2D when establishing the budget. In reviewing the appointed entity's proposed plan, the commission shall review and approve a budget that is consistent with the principles of least cost integrated planning as defined in section 218C and demonstrate cost effectiveness using the commission's approved societal cost benefit test.
Okay,
As circumstances and programs evolve, the commission shall review the plan for unrealized energy efficiency potential and authorize adjustments as necessary in order to realize all reasonably available cost-effective energy efficiency savings. In a budget for an appointed entity using the efficiency fund, the commission shall prioritize the reduction of greenhouse gases and seek to balance the other following objectives. And so this list existed previously. It has been reorganized so that it prioritizes greenhouse gas emission reduction first and then lists the other objectives.
okay.
So this is previously was a paragraph that has now been turned into a list. And so it includes reducing Vermont's total energy demand and consumption and expenditures, reducing the size of future power purchases. On to page 9, equitable distribution of benefits using geographic and economic indicators, limiting the need to update the infrastructure, minimizing cost of electricity.
This is all in this district, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there is a reference added though, in subdivision 7 about including the implementation of electrification. So again, that hadn't previously been in here, but electrification has been added throughout. All right. Next on page 10, some language has been struck regarding the use of the use of the funds on electric repairs to reduce fossil fuels for space heating by supporting electric technologies. And I think that's probably because it's being incorporated throughout.
Okay. Is a heat pump an electric space heater? Yes, it is.
I think that this language is quite old, and that's how we were originally thinking about it. And now heat pumps are a different type of technology in the same vein. And then the next change is on page 14.
What are we striking? That all of 11 is struck.
Yes, that's what I was just saying. It's
That's-
all the same. It's all the same paragraph.
Okay.
So on page 14, a new section is being added for provision of equity and justice in services. So any appointed entity shall ensure an equitable and just provision of services. Not less than 25% of the annual budget shall be targeted for residential services with customers with low to moderate income. Services shall include the provision of weatherization services and other efficiency measures for the purpose of reducing a household's total energy costs and total energy burden. Not less than 12.5% of the annual budget shall be targeted for small businesses and not-for-profit organizations. The cost of providing the services under this subdivision shall be excluded from the calculation of cost effectiveness for the appointed entity's portfolio of services. On or before September 1, 2026, the appointed entity shall propose and the commission shall evaluate the appropriateness of a statewide low-income energy efficiency rate for regulated fuels. The commission may consider the technical feasibility of implementation before approving such a rate. For a distribution utility that is also an appointed entity, such a commission approved discounted low-income rate and has an income discounted rate. That appointed entity may elect to apply its commission approved discounted low-income rate criteria to the energy efficiency charge in lieu of adopting a statewide low-income energy efficiency rate.
Can I just add, am I understanding this paragraph correctly? It says a very substantial portion of the customers served, 25% of the annual budget for residential services for low and moderate income people, 12.5% for small businesses and not-for-profit, we're up to 37.5% of the annual budget. And then it goes on, will be excluded under this subdivision from the calculation of cost effectiveness of the entity's portfolio. So we would ignore 25, 35, 37, almost 40% of what they spend. We would ignore and not count it in terms of its cost effectiveness.
Yes.
Is that what I'm reading? Thank you.
The cost of providing services, that's Efficiency Vermont's cost.
Yeah, so if you're evaluating Efficiency Vermont, and
Yeah,
their cost effectiveness of what they do, you're going to ignore it 40%, almost 40% of what they do. That's what that says.
I read it to mean that when you think of the cost effectiveness of what the projects are, that the energy efficiency Vermont's cost to provide those services is
that's how I was reading it originally, that when you go, you don't cost that. You look at the ongoing savings that will be going on year after year, not the initial cost to Efficiency Vermont to set it up.
But I would assume that part of what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the electricity cost more effective for Vermonters as a whole.
Yeah.
And here you're excluding a very large bunch of Vermonters. And what this says is, for what you say for the wealthy or for large corporations, you'll count as something good, but what you say for everybody else won't.
Think of it differently, but
I'm getting confused. Not right. So your concern is that it says basically that 25 and 12, so
Yeah,
37, 38.
it's what you're going to count and what you're going to measure
Yeah,
in terms of its cost effectiveness.
I think what it says is what you're not gonna measure is what it costs Efficiency Vermont to put a heat pump in the double wide.
Well,
What you're going to measure is how much efficiency, how much money, or how much better usage, however they set that up, that family in the double wide gets. But you're not going to cover, but if they're providing the service to National Life, when they put solar tiles on their roof, on that, you're going to count, you're going to deduct, I think, the cost of providing the service.
Well, I think put another way.
I'm looking for someone to say, is that what this is saying?
If I'm reading it, the way I'm reading it says that they're incentivized for doing things for the large corporation that on the one hand, and then disincentivized, or they're not incentivized at all for doing for low and moderate incomes and small businesses.
Okay, see, that's what,
Because it won't count as
what they said is that
They
they
won't measure.
want to incentivize that it goes to that lower group. the small bit, because they're the ones that have the trouble, have the greatest problem affording it was
May say that.
$800 after my rebate.
What I want to know as a measure of how well this operation is working is, I want to look at its performance in all sectors. I don't want to
Okay,
take a certain sector and say, I'm not going to look at how well it does what it's
I
doing.
think that Efficiency Vermont will be able to address this with
Perhaps.
okay, we're gonna hear from Efficiency Vermont. We'll let Ellen go through. And then
I just want to make sure I understood what I was
Yeah.
reading.
I think Senator Beck and I have a slightly different,
Yeah.
that may not be what it says, so we need to make sure that it says what we think it's supposed to say. But, and we will have Senator Watson back in and she can tell us what she intended to say. Okay, let's move.
All right, so actually not much left for me to walk through. So I'm starting on page 15. So there's language that is struck out. Starting with line 11, and that is the language that is moved to page 5. So the existing funding sources from the forward capacity market and the Reggie sales is
Okay.
has been previously here on page 15. It's being moved to page 5.
Okay,
It's also striking the reference on line 2 that these funds are used just specifically for thermal energy and process fuel efficiency, because it's moving them to be used for both program types.
okay.
On page 17, another reference to greenhouse gas emission reductions has been added. On page 18, there is another strikeout of the programs delivered on a whole building basis has been struck, as well as the reference to thermal energy and process fuel use. On page 18, subdivision 2 has been struck, which requires establishing the clearinghouse. That was struck because this is outdated language. And then same with page 19, at the top of page 19, that language is struck because it is outdated.
Okay, that is our area. You get me right.
Sure.
All right,
So I can make notes. Okay.
did you want me to stick around
Sure.
or did you want me to? I'll watch.
That's would be fine.
Okay.
Then you're out of this room.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, if you could watch, that would be helpful.
All right, let me know.
Okay. So you have some idea of where we are. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're already behind, so we're gonna gonna go on to Ed McNamara, who's chair of the Public Utility Commission. Welcome back. Last time you were here, I think we confirmed you.
Appreciate that.
Now we're into the, and do you still? Now we're into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, you might be regretting that in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
All right, for the record, Ed McNamara, Chair of the Public Utility Commission.
Slides from you.
I've just finished them on the way over here, so I will send you.
Okay, so we don't have them on.
You do not have them online.
All right. Can you put them up on the board so everyone can see them? Is that possible?
It's not.
No.
On the
Okay,
laptop.
then let's go.
So quick. Who is the Public Utility Commission? We're an independent and positive judicial body, 3 commissioners appointed for staggered 6-year terms, confirmed by the Senate. We're distinct from the Department of Public Service, which represents public interest before the PUC. We are not part of the administration, and we regulate almost all the monopoly utilities in Vermont, including the energy efficiency utilities. So I want to start with a little bit of context instead of diving right into it.
So why did the EEs exist in the first place? So they're established about 25 years ago. And it really came from this fundamental concept that of the electric utilities in particular, but all utilities, but started with the electrics, have to provide least cost service. That's in Title 30, Section 218C. And when we look at least cost, that includes environmental and GHG emissions as well. It's not just purely economic costs. Utilities have to do every 3 years an integrated resource plan demonstrating how they're meeting the standard, how they're providing service to customers at least cost. Energy efficiency has always been the lowest cost resource. There's very, very few exceptions. It's always the lowest cost resource. So 25 years ago, a lot of the utilities did not have incentive to actually do energy efficiency because energy efficiency reduced their kilowatt hour sales, reduced the revenues.
Yeah.
So the idea was to create this third party entity, the EUs, and they were tasked with achieving, quote, all reasonably available cost-effective energy efficiency. Early on, first, I think 6-7 years, there was a hard cap on the budget. But around 2006, 2007, that cap went away. So for the last 20 years, the PUC sets the budget for the energy efficiency utilities to realize all reasonably available cost-effective energy efficiency. So the statute itself is a little confusing. It talks about setting the energy efficiency charge to achieve. What we're really doing is actually setting up a budget. The energy efficiency charge is basically formulaic. It is what is the charge on customers' bills to actually collect enough money to achieve that budget. So it's very formulaic. It's very similar to electric rates. In other words, an electric utility will have an overall revenue rate, and they have to meet that by the electric rates. So different customer classes, residential, commercial, industrial, they'll pay different rates depending on usage, things like that. So there's a line item on everyone's electric bill. Here's your energy efficiency charge. So electric efficiency has been and currently is funded through the energy efficiency charge. That's how that is. Thermal efficiency work is funded through Ellen mentioned Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, auction revenues, ISO New England's forward capacity market revenues. Those monies come in, are used for thermal efficiency by Efficiency Vermont and City of Burlington Electric Department. Those are two electric EEs. And then for Vermont Gas, thermal efficiency is provided through its own energy efficiency charge, very similar to the electric side. So that's the overall context. So PUC's concerns with S65. So first, this represents a fundamental change to a 25-year-old model that has served Vermonters really well. So change can be good, not necessarily opposed to change, but it shouldn't be done quickly, and it shouldn't be done with extremely limited analysis that's happened to date with this bill. So a couple specific points. S65 would increase electric bills. So again, I mentioned earlier that energy efficiency, lowest cost resource. And that energy efficiency charge on your bill actually reduces the cost of your utility providing service. So what you're doing, if you're diverting money from energy efficiency to electrification, is you're taking away the lowest cost resource. You're reducing the amount of that lowest cost energy efficiency, the amount of energy efficiency being provided by the EUs. And the kilowatt hours that are otherwise saved from energy efficiency needs to be met through higher cost generation. Generation is almost always going to be more expensive than energy efficiency. So as you reduce the amount of energy efficiency by diverting money to electrification, you're increasing the electric bills for customers. Second major concern, S65 duplicates the work of existing monopolies. So we've had for the last, I think it was 2015 is when Renewable Energy Standard established Tier 3. And that's basically tells the electric utilities, go out and reduce fossil fuel usage for your customers. A large part of what they've been doing, electric vehicle incentives, some heat pump incentives. They've also done a lot of work on converting triggering operations from diesel to electric. So, but what we're doing now by adding electrification to the EU's remit is basically saying, EU, you as a regulated monopoly, go compete against the existing electric utility, the other regulated monopoly, and achieve the same thing. Another aspect where there's duplication, because the electric utilities have this least cost requirement in statutes, if the EU is not providing all reasonably available cost-effective energy efficiency anymore, utilities may need to do their own efficiency programs. So if they're doing their own efficiency programs, you have another overlap and additional competition between the two regulated monopolies. So basically, S65 results in ratepayers paying two different utilities for similar efforts, potentially both the electrification and energy efficiency. Another concern, S65 duplicates the low-income energy efforts as well. So we have 5 in the state, we have 5 regional community action agencies and associated weatherization assistance providers. For the last several decades, since at least the 80s, maybe the 70s, they've been providing Vermonters with low income weatherization assistance, heating assistance, very important services. So S65 requires 25% of annual EU budget be targeted for low income customers, including providing weatherization services. So we already have a very strong system in place. What it needs is more stable funding, not competition. And we don't need to duplicate the efforts with the associated inefficiencies and the cost per monitors that's going to result. S65 also fundamentally changes the energy efficiency charge. As I mentioned earlier, the EEUs are providing a critical and very important service, basically on behalf of the electric utilities. That's under the existing model where the EEC is being raised from electric ratepayers to provide services to electric ratepayers. So essentially what's happening now is the energy efficiency charge, is becoming a tax to fund decarbonization instead of a funding mechanism for provision of energy services. It's a fundamental shift in thinking about the EEUs and the energy efficiency charge. So in terms of decarbonization and funding, a couple of months ago, we issued a report on Clean Heat Standard, recommended either increase the fuel tax or a thermal energy benefit charge. We're not opposed to funding the decarbonization. You have to do it right though. The money should come from within the sector that you actually want to be regulated. Every report on reducing GHG emissions in the thermal sector has been a lot of them. Every one of them says the funding needs to come from the fuels you're trying to reduce. And if you think about it, it's a basic economic principle. You tax the quote bad and incentivize the good. So what S65 is doing is it's tax on the good. You want people to decarbonize through electrification. You want people to do electric vehicles. You want them to do heat pumps. Yet you're also changing this, so you're actually increasing their bills and you're adding costs to electrification while telling them to go out and buy it needed. So I do also want to talk a little bit about the language itself. This is my last point, and this just gets to the first point I had about how quickly this is happening without really any analysis, any study. So I've been doing this for the better part of 23 years now. I don't understand all of what's in this bill. And there's 5 different sections related to the budget that seem very contradictory. So for example, section 209D2D sets future revenues, basically says, keep 2026 levels adjusted for inflation. My view appears to be in perpetuity. PUC no longer has any role in setting the energy or setting the electric or the revenues raised from the energy efficiency charge on the electric side. So later down on that page, establishes the factors used by the PUC to set the energy efficiency charge. As I said before, the energy efficiency charge is a formulaic outcome of the budget. So if you already have the budget, we're not really setting the energy efficiency charge except for the year-to-year variations that would naturally occur. That section also says that we have to prioritize GHG reductions. Next page requires the PUC to set a budget consistent with least cost planning. Further down on page 8, requires the PUC to set a budget prioritizing reduction of greenhouse gases. It's like 4 different things in 2 pages, and it's not entirely clear what it is we're supposed to be doing. I'll also say as well that when Ellen was talking about the RGGI and FCM funds, the way I think about this is you take the energy efficiency charge, the RGGI money, the FCM money, throw it all in a pot, and then it can be used in any way. That appears to be what S65 is proposing. The way it's written, right now, Vermont Gas, which is an EDU, is not able to access the RGGI and FCM funds. The way it's written, as far as I can tell, Vermont Gas now has equal access to RGGI and FCM funds, which I'm pretty sure was not the case, but simply reflects the fact that this is moving really quickly. And quite honestly, is a little sloppy at this point. And for something so fundamental to electric service, especially when we're trying to decarbonize Vermont's economy, it's just, it's not moving at a pace that is commensurate with the significant impacts. That's all I've got.
Can you send that to us in bullet form?
I can.
The chair likes bullets.
I can do
They're easier to reference.
Sure.
Okay. Senator Chip.
Thank you. Really good testimony. I think you succinctly made the case against Act 65 with your attacks on, this is a tax on the good. So for me, you always want to tax what you don't like, stuff says what you do. And that crystallized a lot of the opposition to this. My question to you is, you've described the sloppiness, setting that aside. That happens a lot in this building, but we fix things in coming years and coming sessions. My question to you is, what's the worst case scenario? Should this move forward? What is the possible sky falling scenario that you would expect that would happen on the short term that we wouldn't be able to necessarily correct with additional conversations in the coming year? What's the absolute worst possible outcome of passing this legislation?
Not
Higher
considering
tax rates
anything going on in Washington.
Yeah. 3% increase in electricity rates over the next year or two? Is it more than that?
We haven't calculated that. And this is more in terms of significant impacts, it's setting you down a really bad policy path. So you can fix that bad policy path in the future. The question is, why start down the bad policy path without doing an analysis first about is it good policy or not? So yes, you can always fix problems, but why create the problems? Is my counter to that.
Okay.
So well, I don't see why this needs to pass this year versus next year. There's nothing in here that I see that's fundamentally that is time sensitive.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So the timing doesn't give anyone time to analyze because we're essentially switching goals. The goal until now has been to incentivize less use of electricity. We now want to incentivize more use of electricity. And we are doing that using a charge in your electric bill. So there is a obviously, there's a huge shift here. And I can see, yeah, where it gives you a whole list of things you could maybe consider in setting a budget. But it starts out saying the budget is set. And so don't worry, we're not raising your electric rate this year. But and how much are you supposed to decrease, lower your carbon emissions? What's that? What's the basis? Do you get a percent for what? A percent increase for reducing it? It's a lot harder to measure than electricity, which goes over wires and through meters. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Andrea Cohen. Okay. Can you throw me a mark? Highlight. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Andrea Cohen with Vermont Electric Cooperative. Just sent my notes over to Charlotte just now. Hopefully she'll get them in a minute. For those of you who don't know Vermont Electric Co-op, we're actually the second largest distribution utility in the state. We have 33,000 members. We span across 8 counties and we have 75 towns. People are often surprised that we're as big as we are because we're up there and kind of quiet usually. I haven't been here. I'd be happy to come back and tell you a lot more about us and what we do. I know we don't have the time today. And I regret that I'm here today, not coming in support of this bill. Normally, by the time we get here, we like to have worked through a lot of things. So we're not having to come not in support of the bill, but that is the case right now. I will just share a few bullets, a few thoughts from the utility, distribution utility, and kind of member experience perspective. We been doing a lot of work in this space, so I just want to share some of our knowledge and perspective on this. This is a significant policy change. And I'll echo a lot of what Chair McNamara said. Opportunity to talk with key stakeholders to really talk about how to go about doing this would bring maybe some different approaches than what's in front of you today. Since 2016 or 17, we as a utility have actually been implementing beneficial electrification. We have a lot of incentive to do it and do it well, and a lot of experience and success to the state. And a lot of these projects are in partnership with Efficiency Vermont when it's mutually beneficial and it makes sense. So we consider them a partner in a lot of the work we do, and we value the work they're doing in the efficient companies. But we think some fundamental questions need to be asked and answered before moving ahead. For starters, what's the work that needs to get done? I won't even go into that. There's a lot of groups working on, carbon reduction, and a lot of committees who kind of have some really great ideas about what the next steps are. That makes sense. So once we decide what's the work we need to do in this space, we want to ask the first question is, who's the best entity to do that work? We might be the best entity. Efficiency Vermont might be the best entity. The weatherization agencies, there's a lot of partners and players. So I think we have to say, what's the work that needs to get done, and who's the entity that can do it efficiently and effectively. And those conversations really should happen. One of the benefits to the Tier 3 program that we have at BEC, the beneficial electrification, is it's very customized to our membership. What works in Burlington doesn't necessarily work in the Northeast Kingdom and so on. So we really do a customized approach to our work.
Okay, so
Yeah.
when you're doing efficiency work,
No, we're not doing
You're
efficiency
not
work.
doing, you were doing it.
Beneficial electrification work,
Okay.
which results in carbon reduction. So for example, the sugar makers that have been using a generator forever, if we're able to do a line extension and they can now use electricity and get off of fossil fuels and get onto the electric system, we're saving a lot of carbon. It's kind of one of those win-wins. There's a JP project. We work with JP Resort on this dynamic electrification project. We got them off of fossil fuels onto electric power for their water park and one of their hotels, and it's saving 500,000 gallons of propane a year. I mean, that's a meaningful carbon reduction work.
And that is being paid for how?
So for that example was we put an incentive in. Efficiency Vermont actually did from some of their thermal money. And JP, it was great. It was a partnership with a lot of different players, but it was a project that required a lot of our work in terms of
And I'm
the
assuming in
electrification.
Vermont, a lot of projects are done like that.
Yeah.
Nobody has enough money
Right.
to do something that large. So if this goes into effect, what would happen to your ability to do that?
Well, it wouldn't affect our ability to do what we're already doing,
Okay.
but back to some of those fundamental questions, which I'll get into like the money part right
Yeah.
now and again in a few minutes. So, who should do the work? Who's well positioned? Sometimes it's many entities, sometimes it's one
Yeah.
or the other. But who should pay for that work is also an important question to ask. And as Chair McNamara spoke about, we want to quote tax the bads and not the goods. And we feel for this beneficial electrification work, for the carbon reduction work, that it shouldn't be the electric ratepayers that continue to contribute towards this. And so some of the questions, and we don't even know the answers, this is why we think more conversation needs to be had. You start with the EEC fund that we've been paying for 25 years, members have been paying for 25 years. If mission's been accomplished and we've done a lot of great work in electrification, maybe, again, I'm not being facetious, it's like maybe we can reduce that. Maybe we shouldn't be charging electric ratepayers as much and we can actually get some bill relief. Especially as we want people to reduce their use of fossil fuels and convert to, we have to make it more beneficial. If you're thinking about buying an electric vehicle, you don't want your electric bill to go up more than it needs to, right? Because all of a sudden that cost comparison is less ideal. So we'd love to see, people pay less rates and less EEC if we really want to move towards electrification. As the Energy Action Network might have been in the past to talk about, all their reports always point to the fact that electric ratepayers are paying a disproportionate share towards, we're not the problem anymore. We really need to be moving away from just taxing, frankly, electric ratepayers because we're regulated and we're easy to catch and, there you go. So we know that's where we're at. We're all can. So we'd love to see a ramp down and a movement away, not a doubling down on using electric ratepayers' money for these things. So, and again, not that, everybody has a lot of similar goals. And so the question is, how do we get there? And what's the right policy? There's probably a lot of good perspectives on that. So I just, as a point of comparison, VEC collects and remits about $5 million a year towards the EEC. And we're going through some budgeting and some rate making, and that's basically equivalent to our whole vegetation maintenance budget to, keep the trees from falling on the lines and the power going out. It's equivalent to what we pay in property taxes a year. Like, as far as we're concerned, it's a lot of money. And maybe at the end of a conversation, we say, no, this is exactly what we should be doing with it. But I think that conversation needs to be had. Because for our ratepayers, it's a lot of money. I didn't talk about our demographics. More than 50% of our members are age 65 and older. We have a lot of folks on fixed incomes. 7 of the top 11 towns with the highest energy burden are VEC towns. So when we're working on affordability, we're working on reliability, we're working on carbon reduction. We think we can make a lot of movement in all those things, but it's gonna take some conversations and some work and some stakeholder involvement. So we would love to have more time to really work through these issues. So
Okay.
that was, I don't know if it was 5 minutes.
Wait, you gotta take questions.
Okay.
Have we got any questions? Okay, you
No,
don't have to
very
take
much.
questions. Okay. You may have. Here somewhere. All right, next is Louis Porter.
Hi,
Hi.
for the record, Louis Porter, General Manager of Washington Electric Co-op. Because you have a long witness list and because I agree with everything that the last two witnesses said, I'll be mercifully brief. But happy to take any questions. Washington Electric, like our sibling co-op, Vermont Electric, is a rural electric provider that's a nonprofit cooperative. We serve 41 towns, the rural parts of 41 towns, 12,000 members. And probably the most financially and operationally difficult territory in the North. 2 points I just want to underscore. One is that I would be hard pressed to think of a less productive policy than to increase fees or have fees on electricity be collected and then partial of those returned as incentives to encourage people to change to electricity. Cost is a major factor when people consider moving to beneficial electrification technologies. As the cost of electricity goes up, that becomes more difficult for them and less of them will do it. Obviously, people do adopt those technologies for many reasons, but cost is certainly important and everybody figures the cost out before they do that. So that's a major challenge for me with this policy. The second challenge I see or problem I see with this is that we call Efficiency Vermont a utility, but it's very different than the distribution utilities. Nobody's calling Efficiency Vermont in the middle of the night when their power's out, and nobody at Efficiency Vermont's climbing utility poles in the middle of the night to put the lines back up. That's fine. They do many great programs. There's no reason why everybody has to be a distribution utility like the one I work at. But I think this puts what has been over the years a manageable conflict at times between the missions of Efficiency Vermont and the mission of the distribution utilities. This makes that conflict much more difficult to work through and much more problematic and much more significant conflict. And I can go a little bit into that if you'd like. I think you've heard from VEC and Chair McNamara about that, but the conflicts are both operational in the sense that we'd be operating duplicate programs that would be using the same materials, the same contractors, and seeking the same customers or members in our case. And also more broader conflicts in the sense that the missions of the distribution utilities include managing the time at which people use electricity, when their peaks are, and demand side management now. And this brings that work, splits that work between the efficiency utility and the distribution utilities. Thank you.
Did I hear you say that it would be contradicting our intentions if we had electricity fee used in order to get people to use more electricity?
Yes.
But don't we do that with the gas tax? I mean, we collect gas taxes to pay for the roads, or even the electric EV fee that we just implemented was to get more EV infrastructure out there. So we're charging a fee in order to make it easier to use those services.
But our goal with the gas tax is to, or at least some people's goal with the gas tax is to decrease use of gasoline. So to the extent that you would say take a tax on gasoline and put that towards the deployment of electric vehicle infrastructure, your incentives would be lined up. You would be discouraging use of gasoline and providing the ability for people to move to electric vehicles.
Right, we just implemented that EV registration fee last year to raise $3 million to fund more EV infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. And to be fair, we do that in a small way right now with Tier 3. We collect Tier 3 money through electric rates and then pay to incentivize people to move to electricity. This would be expanding and increasing that, I would call it inconsistent policy to a greater extent.
Okay.
That's all I have. Happy to answer any questions. About me or about the co-op or what we do.
Thank you. I think we're still getting up to speed so we can ask a question.
Sounds
This
good.
is all new to us. It kind of all came out, I think, last Friday, and we didn't know until this Monday that we were even getting this bill. So we are working our way through it. Do you have a question?
So first one, did you mention, and maybe I missed it, how much the increase would be for your customers?
Well, that's a complicated question because you're setting the budget level at a level budget. As you heard from Chair McNamara, that might increase the cost of electricity by decreasing the amount you're investing in efficiency programs. I'll also say that the bill proposes a level funded budget, but I've been observing and a participant in government for 20 years. This is how programs increase their revenue and increase their spending.
You don't trust us.
I don't trust myself. I've done this same game myself a few times. You increase mandates, you take on another problem, and then you come back and say we need more funding to do the work. And I, as I say, I've done that a few times myself. So I'm not casting any aspersions, but that's what happens.
I think we need to deal with the possible, if not probable, reality that that is quite possible.
If you're asking an organization to take on more work, they're either going to do less of what they're doing now, or they're going to need more support and funding to do that.
Okay. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have a kind of a significant outage, so I'm going to leave and talk to some members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Ken Nolan, who's General Manager of VEPSA, and he is up on Zoom. Mr. Nolan, some of this committee is new to this, so just tell us who you are, who you represent.
Great. Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, committee. Ken Nolan, I'm the General Manager at Vermont Public Power, VEPSA, as we're known. For those who don't know, we're in a joint action agency that was actually created by the legislature way back in 1979 with the specific purpose of helping the smaller municipal utilities in Vermont. Technically, we can work with all public power, but it's usually municipals we work with to help them reach economies of scale and provide the services that a larger utility like a Green Mountain Power can provide. So our members, we work with 11 of the small municipals right now. Those folks serve about just over 30,000 Vermonters in 50 communities. And we're spread throughout the state, a large portion in the Northeast Kingdom, but we also have Jacksonville on the southern border with Massachusetts. So we're spread across the state entirely. I'd like to start by just saying I agree with Chairman McNamara and the previous witnesses. This S65 has raised a lot of concerns for us. I think it's a substantial change in the policy direction of the state. And it has some specific items that I think the chairman hit very well. And I just want to reinforce a couple of them here. First and foremost, hit it again, and the previous three witnesses have, but taxing electricity, which is effectively what the energy efficiency charge is tax on electricity to incentivize people to use electricity is a regressive approach. And it's not something we would encourage. Secondly, I was stunned to see the bill set Efficiency Vermont's budget based on inflation. I'm personally not aware of another non-governmental entity that has its funding guaranteed in perpetuity through statute. So that was kind of unique from our view. Most importantly for us is this tension between the renewable energy standard tier 3 requirements and the larger mandate that S65 would give Efficiency Vermont. Just to try to put a finer point on something you've been hearing, the distribution utilities and VEPSA as the entity who manages this for our members, we have a statutory requirement to produce a fixed amount of fossil fuel reduction each year. And we have a compliance report to the Public Utility Commission, and we have a financially binding requirement. If we don't meet the standards, there's a financial penalty attached to it. So we are actively promoting fossil fuel reduction as electric utilities. VEPSA, on behalf of our members, issued rebates for electric vehicles, heat pumps, down to forklifts, to electric yard appliances, anything that can get customers off from gasoline to using electricity, we will provide a rebate for. And that effort sits beside right now Efficiency Vermont's work to make the use of electricity as efficient as possible. We do have some overlap because the legislature has given Efficiency Vermont some areas where they can do thermal work. And we routinely have projects similar to what Ms. Cohen described in VEC's territory, where we work with Efficiency Vermont and quote, split the savings, where we each provide, just as an example, 50% of the incentive for a project to be done. And we each claim 50% of their carbon reduction for our various needs. So that negotiation intention exists today. But the expansion you're talking about here provides almost a 100% overlap. We now, instead of being partners trying to work together, to some degree, will be competitors. And any of you who understand markets, supply and demand is going to dictate the cost of what something takes to get work done or a product purchased. So we're very concerned that this mandate for Efficiency Vermont will actually drive up our cost to comply with the Tier 3 portion of the renewable energy standard. We don't know what that will look like yet, but it seems pretty obvious to us that having both entities working in this space with a strong mandate is going to increase the cost of consumers and put us at competing with each other rather than working together. Just for reference, I want to put in front of you, we've just filed our report to the Public Utility Commission on Friday of what the efforts we made in 2024 on Tier 3. Our expenses for the VEPSA members, who represent about 6% of the retail sales in the state, we spent $526,000 in rebates and incentives toward carbon reduction last year. So put that in perspective. Utilities are putting millions of dollars into this carbon reduction already before you talk about moving Efficiency Vermont into the space. At the same time, we're starting to see the impacts of the electrification on the grid. We're seeing from ISO New England estimates of billions of dollars having to go into the regional transmission network for upgrades. I sit on the Velco board of directors, and we're having conversations of projects in the hundreds of millions of dollars for improvements to the Vermont grid to accommodate what's coming. And some of our utility Morrisville, for example, has just completed a study of their system, and we're hearing upgrades in the distribution network of tens of millions of dollars. So we're now in a situation where the utilities are both funding carbon reduction and electrification, and we're starting to have to figure out, well, how are we going to pay for the upgrades to the distribution grid to accommodate this? It seems to me, that the broader conversation of how best to deploy capital for all these entities needs to occur. We need to take the time that's necessary to get this right and determine if the utilities should be still working in the carbon space and fossil fuel reduction, or whether our capital is better utilized to maintain the grid itself. In which case, maybe it does make sense to have Efficiency Vermont take a broader scope. But if you want us to stay in the carbon space, we can't be competing and trying to do the same projects with customers and doubling the administrative overhead to do so. So we would encourage you to take the time you need to understand the implications and unintended consequences and really dig into this. I understand you just got it on Friday and you're learning about it now. But this is not something that should be moved quickly, even though I understand the enticement to do so because of regulated entities. And there's a desire to replace the clean heat standard. I get the pressure, but I really feel like this is moving much faster than is appropriate. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Bullock, you have a question?
No,
Oh, okay. Guess you were stretching.
I move around a lot.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Nolan? Senator Chittenden?
A question to maybe natural resources members based on what he just stated was what thought had been given to the effective dates of July 1, 25 for section 3 and July 1.
Okay.
Is that
Well,
later this
we gotta,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
That'll come in committee discussion.
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Nolan? Okay, thank you. Michael Lazorchak?
Yes, thank you. For the record, Michael Lazorchak, Town of Stowe Electric Department.
Okay, yeah, we cannot see you, we can hear you.
Good. My camera doesn't work, so it's good that you can.
Okay, so we will just listen.
I did submit a filing for Stowe Electric's written testimony. We also joined, like the other utilities, GMPs. Candace will do a much better job than I will, I promise. So I'll make this quick. I manage the Tier 3 program on behalf of the Town of Stowe. And my first programmatic year, we had to procure Tier 2 credits to roll them into Tier 3 to meet our compliance obligation. Since that time, Stowe Electric and Efficiency Vermont has developed a very strong relationship to now where Stowe Electric is running excess in our Tier 3 program, and we do not utilize any Tier 2 credits for Tier 3, which is a great thing. It's great for the utility. It's great for Efficiency Vermont. Our customers love it. They feel like they're part of the utility, part of this decarbonization, electrification challenge that we're all facing. And my biggest concern is the person who manages the Tier 3 program is adding complexity, potentially changing the dynamic between the utility and EVT and our customers. I think it's too soon for that. We at Stowe Electric, we've spent 5 years developing the program that we now have, which runs very well. And we've even invested in our own employee base to come up with a new position that's part of her skill set is to market these programs to our customer base. And so my biggest concern is changing that dynamic. I know the EUs, they do a great job. Their staff does a great job. I'm sure they do not see it the same way as the utilities do. But I'm not convinced from reading the statute and hearing testimony that there won't be a change in the relationship. And I think that's a mistake to make this change to alter the relationship between Stowe Electric and our customers. Beyond that, I share the other comments that you've already heard, and I don't want to take up anyone's time unnecessarily. Stowe Electric, Jackie Pratt is our general manager. We're both happy to come down and provide more detail about our utility and what we do and tell you more about ourselves if you wish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe some other time. This is crossover week. Any questions? I'm not seeing any, so thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Candace Morgan. Come on up.
Let's try to get where it was in the order.
We have about 8 witnesses, and to stay on track, we need to do it in 3 minutes. So I think we can give that we are behind schedule and we
Understood.
will be.
Yes. Okay, well, for the record, Candace Morgan from Green Mountain Power. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I do know that you're short on time, so I promise to keep it brief. I want to direct you before I get started to a letter that's on the committee webpage. It's not my testimony, but it's on behalf of the various distribution utilities who have signed on to that letter, echoing a lot of the concerns that you've heard from Chair McNamara so far today, as well as from the other utility witnesses. I also want to start off by saying that we have a great working partnership with the other utilities in Efficiency Vermont as we think about various policy considerations and other items that, you know, come before the legislature year over year, and also in our day-to-day working in collaboration. As you've heard highlighted from the other utilities so far today, a lot of that work that we do with our customers to help decarbonize is done in partnership with Efficiency Vermont. And what's good is that that can continue to happen, even if nothing were to change before you at this point in time. As you've also heard from others, we think that this is a really complicated change. There are a lot of threads being pulled and a lot of implications that we have concerns will drive up costs unnecessarily for our customers at a time when that's something that we know that they can't afford to pay additional dollars on. There's a lot of work happening in the decarbonization space, as I mentioned, both with distribution utilities and through our work with Efficiency Vermont. And I think we need to better understand kind of what that looks like in total, how those costs are being paid for, and what our customers can afford as we work into the future to further electrify and decarbonize. You know, and one other really key point that I wanted to make is that expanding the scope of work of the electric efficiency utility to emissions reductions while still being paid only by electric customers is not a policy that we can support at this time. I think it requires a broader conversation about other choices before we double down on an electric efficiency charge at the same time that we are asking folks to electrify more. So I think in general, this bill has a lot of unanswered questions in our mind about what those added costs might be for customers. And if we shift the dollars away from efficiency to more of the greenhouse gas emission reduction work without having a broader conversation about who's paying for that work and how we're going to evaluate that going forward, that I think is a policy conversation that just needs more time. And one thing I wanted to mention too is that last legislative session, you all had passed under Act 142, a report to the PUC focused on low and moderate income households and their energy burden, and considering potentially statewide programs or other things to think about how we help them in the energy transition. That report is due back to you in December of this year. Importantly, it included a bunch of different stakeholders to be at the table. I'm not saying it directly maybe solves all of what this bill is contemplating to solve, but it will set forth some recommendations that include that important analysis about how we want to pay for this work and how we want to deliver that for most vulnerable customers. So those are my brief remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So there's a PUC study.
Yes.
Okay. But I think what I'm hearing is and having remembered the last time we went through this committee versus that committee, it was the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 definitions. You have a system right now that you're familiar with and you're comfortable with, and you understand what moves the electric charge, which is figured into your rates. And we want people to move off of power and off of fossil fuels and onto electric power. So we were wanting them to more efficiently use the electric power that they were using. Now we want them to use more, so we still want it efficiently. Nobody trusts that that efficiency rate is going to stay static. Actually, I guess the bill says it will rise with inflation. Which could end up back at the 7 or 8% a year or more, given the impact of trade wars, which are starting to seem more and more likely. And so you're concerned about the impact on your ability to meet your other requirements to reduce fossil fuels. Because if you can give somebody $1,000 incentive to buy an electric vehicle, but the rates go up to the rate where it's going to cost them $1,000 more to charge the vehicle, it's kind of at cross purposes. So, I mean, it's the dynamic is changing here. Part of it is that mention, everything's frozen for this year. But there is an inflation. If we took off inflation and just said, this is it. But if we gave you more money, I assume maybe you could do more tier 3 work.
So
But not if we raise the rates. That's the tension I'm feeling here.
I think you hit on the tension with what we're asking customers to do in terms of electrifying while still having a volumetric kind of electric efficiency charge, right? So the more you use, you're going to be paying more in those moments as you bring on more load. But one point that I wanted to hit on in terms of your question around what our concerns are around what it means for our tier 3 obligations, we actually more so have a concern with what we're asking collectively all of our customers to pay for, if it's both tier 3 and the work, an expanded role from Efficiency Vermont. It's not so much about competition, although I think folks have hit on some of the nuances and some of the concerns that are worth teasing out, but it's more about how electric customers are paying for both of those systems and wanting us to be really thoughtful about what costs we are asking customers to pay, because it's not our dollars, it's our customer dollars in those spaces. And so that's, I think, the point that I just wanted to hit on too, is that it's worthy of more conversation because it is directly Vermonters and our customers' dollars that are funding these different programs.
Okay. Questions? You finished your test?
I have.
Okay. Senator Matters.
I was just curious more about the report or working group of the Act 142. Because it sounded a lot like S65. There's a lot of the same kind of topics that are being discussed in full. I'm curious who's at the table for that report for Act 142. Is it?
Sure, I'm happy to send the link to the committee too, so you have it easily accessible. And I will probably get it wrong or forget to include someone, but that the PUC is the entity conducting that work. They just recently opened a docket for that investigation, asking for informational requests from distribution utilities like, GMP and the others that you've heard from today. Also, electric efficiency utilities, the PPT, BGS, and BED. But then also community action agencies and folks that are delivering some of the low income weatherization work and other stuff as well, which is, I think, an important part. And their voices haven't really been in the S65 conversation that much. And then there might be some other entities that I'm forgetting as well. But it was a pretty all-encompassing list in terms of groups to really focus on and think about how we want to design programs that help some of those.
Okay.
And when does that do that? I know we just passed
December 1st of 2025, so later this year.
later this year.
Okay. And if we do raise the electric rates, that will also, you're going to have, we've been weatherizing in community action since I was on the board 30 years ago. I know we can do more things, but it's been a long time effort. But we have an older housing stock which is deteriorating and more things need to be done. But yeah, there's the balance. If we're raising the rates, so we can help more low and moderate income people not use less electricity, but to use less fuel oil. I guess we haven't done a cost benefit analysis to see, looking at the auditor, to see how that's going to work out, because if it ends up costing people more, then they're not going to do it. But I put in 2 heat pumps. My electric bill's gone up 12%. There were rooms that didn't get comfortably heated. I've had 3 engineers come in and tell me to forget trying to heat my house with heat pumps. For a variety of reasons, but I've got 2 kind of afterthought rooms that are now heated, but my bill is up. And I'm not saving in fuel oil what it costs to put the pumps in, so it's that kind of cost benefit. We haven't figured it out yet. I think that's what I'm hearing, is the concern that in some ways this is at cost purposes. We want you to use this, but to get you to use it, we're going to raise the cost of it. And that discourages it. And that's always been the balance here. Okay.
I'm trying to understand the language. I was just texting or writing to my friend here that was in the morning committee that addressed it. And it's unclear to me if this language would allow for these monies that would then be under the control of Efficiency Vermont to be used for decarbonization efforts that wouldn't necessarily require more electricity, like weatherization or advanced wood burners. I'm guessing it probably currently does. Do you think GMP might get less against this if these dollars were only allowed to decarbonize with efforts that would actually increase electricity usage through? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does make sense what you're saying, and I'll maybe call the committee's attention back to some work from, I think, 2020, and also some further amendments in more recent years than that, what we call Act 151 or the Energy Efficiency Modernization Act, which did carve out some portion of the electric efficiency charge dollars for use in thermal and transportation sectors. And it was a small dollar amount, time limited. And also there was some language in there about nexus to electric, I can't remember the exact language. Anyway, somewhere in my brain, and I'll think of it as soon as I leave this chair, but I'll follow up with that with you as well. But
You can follow up with it.
okay, I think that would be an interesting conversation, Senator. But I think more importantly, we still want to think about what are those total costs out there that we're asking customers to pay, both with the electric efficiency charge and through tier 3 and other things as well. So I wouldn't want to say it would solve all of our concerns if we just focused that the dollars that we're talking about here for getting folks to electrify, because I think we need to have a broader conversation about how we're paying for that work in general. And so continuing to double down and have it be just electric customers paying for work in the thermal and transportation space. I just think that there's broader policy conversations that we should have, but it's an interesting concept for sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, let me just, if I could,
Yeah.
as you talk back to what we did in past years regarding thermal versus electricity. And the principal reason that we made the one change that we did that affected this particular industry that you referred to, Madam Chair, was we found that there were one or more, and probably more, commercial customers who had done everything that they could do in terms of electric energy remediation, and there wasn't anything else they could logically do. But there were tremendous opportunities for them to save on energy by moving to savings in the thermal sector. And so we did, and it was as a pilot project. We made that change and allowed that. And there was a holdup. We allowed it for several years. There was a holdup because of COVID, which restricted their ability to do that. And we did do an extension, but that's the only time that I can recall that we've made a change relative to focusing on electric utilities. What's proposed here are obviously major changes, and I think as some of the folks have discussed thus far, everybody doesn't fully understand what's in this bill. I looked at one sentence, the sentence that I think I spoke about a lot, there were 157 words in the sentence. It was incomprehensible. I can't. Actually, I have a program that counts.
That's what you've been doing.
It's productive use of my time.
Yes. And with that pilot, what it was funded by allowing those businesses to keep the money they were being required to pay into the fund. They said, if you let us keep that and use it on thermal, we can cut down on our energy usage. We can do a better job, because right now we're paying 10 million in and
We're getting nothing out.
we're getting nothing back. And that did work in enough cases. So, and there was some pretty amazing results once we got it moving after COVID. So, but this is a change to the whole base funding. And there seems to be some discomfort with speed, with lack of analysis as to what is really going to happen, and to impacts on electric rates and what control is there.
And it appears to institute a and what may well be, and I guess we almost had a debate on that, whether this is an ongoing change in terms of the method of calculation.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into how it's going to be calculated. Okay, got Darren Springer. Darren, okay. Well,
Hi, good afternoon. Darren Springer, General Manager with Burlington Electric Department. And if it's okay with you, Chair, I'd like to share just a couple slides to use as I go along. I'll be quite expeditious.
And you are an energy efficiency utility, right?
We are both. We're very unique. We're a distribution utility for the city of Burlington, and we are an energy efficiency utility for the city of Burlington as well. I see it may not be possible for me to share via Zoom, but I do have, I have shared with you, and it's on your website, our presentation. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Okay, excellent.
Here you go. We've got it.
Here we go. So just briefly, Burlington Electric, as mentioned, we're the third largest utility in Vermont. We serve the city of Burlington. We are uniquely also an energy efficiency utility, recognizing our work on energy efficiency, which dates back into the 1980s and even predates the founding of Efficiency Vermont. So we have an energy efficiency charge on our bill that we use to serve our customers with efficiency services. When we think about energy efficiency in Burlington, we're saving our customers approximately 10 million annually on electric bills through avoided energy transmission and capacity costs. Efficiency has helped to flatten the load in Burlington. And in fact, we use 9% less electricity as of the latest calendar year data from 2023 than we did back in 1989, even though we have been a growing city. And we have an investment between BED and our customers of about 87 million over that period of time, which is fairly significant. We also operate Tier 3 programs. We've talked about the Tier 3 incentive under the Renewable Energy Standard, and I just wanted to illustrate a couple of results. Since June of 2020, when we launched what we termed our Green Stimulus Program, where we really boosted our heat pump incentives with both Tier 3 dollars and efficiency dollars, we've seen about a 30x increase in adoption, and we have almost 3,000 heat pumps installed in Burlington. We also offer enhanced rebates for our income qualified customers, almost a quarter of our electric vehicle rebates and about 13% of our heat pump rebates have gone to our income qualified customers. I think what my colleague Candace from Green Mountain Power just mentioned, Act 151 and Act 44, I wanted to touch on those as they relate to Burlington Electric just for a moment. We have now for about 5 years had pilot authority authorized through these various pieces of legislation to use a portion of our efficiency dollars for emission reduction projects. And some of those dollars are helping to fill important gaps. And I'll mention here our geothermal test well program. We are helping now 12 customers drill geothermal test wells with that funding. And when you drill a geothermal test well, you don't know if you're going to have a good location or not for geothermal, but it can be an expense that's $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000. I'll give an example. Our new high school in Burlington is one of our recipients of the test well funding, and they are going to have a geothermal heating and cooling system as a result directly of this program and directly of the pilot legislation that you all authorized that let us begin to use our efficiency dollars in more flexible ways. In addition, for our customers, we provide incentives, and they don't necessarily look at whether the money came from the efficiency or from the general operating tier 3 budget. They look at the total rebate they can get. And we've used our efficiency dollar flexibility through these pilots to help more of our customers access various electrification technologies. And you can see here that they've spurred adoption of over 500 electric vehicles, almost 200 EV charging stations, over 500 heat pumps. And we've even used those funds to support the procurement through Green Mountain Transit of 5 new electric transit buses that serve not only Burlington, but the surrounding communities as well. So I guess my point here would be, and I know I'm a little at odds with some of the prior testimony, but our experience here with these pilots is that in Burlington, we can use this flexibility to support enhanced electrification and emission reduction projects in a way that's complementary to our tier 3 programs and do so effectively. And I'll just end on this last slide, which is, if you look on the bill, S65, there's some language, as Ellen pointed out, where we talk about a distribution utility that's also an efficiency utility. There's some of that on pages 6 through 7 and elsewhere in the bill. A lot of that relates to our work and helps us access more of our efficiency dollars in a flexible way. We're supportive of advancing those provisions. It would build very much on the pilots that we've had. And the pilots extend through next year, and then they would expire. And we really feel it is important to have a solution to continue to allow that flexibility. Importantly as well, this bill would help us access some of those funds to support the building sector policies that Burlington's working on, whether that's commercial sector, energy work, energy efficiency work, or rental weatherization standard work, or other work that we're undertaking in the city. And I will stop sharing here. Appreciate you allowing me to run through those slides and glad to answer any questions.
Okay, so you are a distribution. You have your own wood heat generator, electric generation. You distribute it. You are also your own electric. The concern I've heard here, because you're one, you have control over the impact on your rates, right? So that if you're, thermal, and I am told thermal is the way to go because it's almost cost-free once you spend $30,000 finding out if you can do it. Get through the installation. It's good, but you have the ability. If it looks like your rates are going to start to go up to what you see as an unsustainable level, you can cut back. And I think what I'm hearing from the other utilities is they don't control the use of their efficient, there's not the same linkage. There's 2 different organizations, one that's spending the money and one whose customers are raising the money, and the benefits are not necessary. They don't have that control to say, whoa, rates are going up too much, so we've got to, cut back on this program for a year or 2. until we've saved enough for, you know, whatever the business decision. And I think that may be the difference, but I stand to be corrected.
Well, I'd certainly acknowledge that we're unique in the city of Burlington in having both functions under one organization. And so I'd certainly defer to my colleagues at Efficiency Vermont and in the distribution utilities to speak to the partnership aspects of their work together. I do know that the efficiency, the idea of having flexibility with our efficiency funds makes a lot of sense. We have that in the pilots. We'll need more of that going forward in any future where we're going to meet some of our climate goals and achieve some cost stability for customers, because there is some declining opportunity, in my view, in the traditional electric efficiency sector, in the way that the funds have been categorized to date. We've done a lot of great work to bring on efficient lighting, to have more stringent building codes, and to achieve a lot. And if you look at where the carbon is, as you all know, in Vermont, it's not in the electric sector by and large. It's in the thermal sector. It's in the transportation sector. And so electrifying those sectors and having the flexibility to have programs working together that help move that needle is going to be really important. We also know, obviously, that as you spend money with electric utilities in Vermont, more of those dollars stay in the state. It's essentially a buy local opportunity. I think of customers who are using an electric vehicle in Burlington. Not only can they fuel up with 100% renewable power, they have less maintenance costs. They have far lower per mile fuel costs because we are a cheaper, cleaner source than gasoline. And they're helping to keep more money in the state. So everything we can do to have flexibility for us in Burlington to continue to advance these efforts is good from a climate and an economic standpoint, in my view.
Okay, I think we all agree with that. But it is 300, it's huge change, because when we set up the efficiency utility, the goal was to use less electricity, to use it more efficiently. And we've evolved. And the question is, how do we evolve this mechanism we have here into meeting, and we have on occasion allowed more flexibility. But do we do that, or do we set up a completely different, organization? And this says, no, we're going to allow more flexibility. I think the issue is more one right now of, okay, I mean, if you're just going to allow more electric, but if the electric rate is going to automatically increase over time, or somebody else is going to raise our rates, I think that is the concern I'm hearing. It's unknown. We don't know what's going to happen.
And just to be crystal clear for us in Burlington, we're not looking to increase the rate for the efficiency charge. Right. I think we're looking to take what is available and use it more flexibly. And we're happy to support that effort.
Yeah, but you control your rate.
We control our general electric rates. We don't control our efficiency rate. That's set through the mechanism that Chair McNamara, I think, discussed earlier.
All right. Okay. All right. So you aren't completely independent. Okay. Questions? Senator Matos has a question.
Yeah. Hey, Darren. Chris Matos here. Live just a little north of you up in Milton. I'm just curious, after being reminded of the report here in Act 142, and it has a lot of the same, drivers as S65. And it sounds like BED's in a little bit different position than other organizations because they kind of have their own EEU and also being the provider of power. I'm curious, because that report's not due back till the end of this year, if that would be something that does this bill waiting, till next year after we get that report, would that actually affect you in any way, or being able to actually see what all the stakeholders kind of have to say? Because I think are you one of how you're kind of set up, it seems like?
Yeah. We are. Yeah, as mentioned, for us, the current authority that we have, the pilot authority, extends into next year. So if nothing was to happen this year, we would certainly want to come back at the very latest next session and have a really thoughtful approach to ensure that these important pilot authorities that we have don't expire. So for us, the timeline is certainly, if something moves this year, that would be helpful. If it doesn't move this year, then certainly by next year, we would want to have that conversation so we don't lose some of the good flexibility that we've had.
Cool.
Okay.
And are you a part of the Act 142 conversations with what that report's looking to generate?
We do. We participate in all of those types of proceedings and conversations and are happy to do so.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, committee. We've got Peter Walk next. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 after this. And then I think we're going to take a break. For a few minutes and then come back and do some committee discussion about where we are, where we think we may want to go and what additional information we're going to need to get there. So Peter, welcome. Good to have both sides in here.
For the record, Peter Walker, Managing Director of Efficiency Vermont. I'd like to remind the committee that I'm wearing my VEIC hat today. That is the nonprofit entity that operates Efficiency Vermont on behalf of the state. So I'd like to make that clear for all folks involved. Senator Beck and Senator Hardy certainly saw me do the hat motion a lot over the last month or so. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate the testimony.
15 minutes behind.
Yeah. I appreciate the testimony that you heard today, much of which was provided as well to the policy committee, who considered and made significant changes to this bill through the course of their deliberations. And so much of what you're hearing is echoed from testimony provided earlier. There are a couple of clarifications that I would like to make because I think there are some, lack of clarity on what this bill does and doesn't do. Since 2008, you have directed Efficiency Vermont to pursue greenhouse gas emission reductions as one of the top 4 priorities. This bill isn't adding greenhouse gases as a priority. It's not. It's simply saying we want to elevate. You want us to elevate that as a priority. Since 2008, you have made that clear. So this is not a drastic shift in public policy. This is simply a reiteration of where you have been for the last 17 years. There's been a lot of question about what this means for ratepayer costs and how this affects. Electrification is the policy of the state. That is what is driving the increase in electrification and the electric costs associated with electrification. That is neither due towards the tier 3 model that we've talked about, with the work that we do on the EDUs, all are in support of that effort. So that is something, yes, we need to resolve as a whole, but that is not a specific implication of this bill. Further, it's important to remember that while volumetric electric rates have gone up in recent years, the residential electric efficiency charge has declined 21% since 2018. And in inflation adjustment terms, that's 42%. So as electric rates are going up, EEC rates are going down. Part of that is more electricity is being sold because of the electrification efforts of the state. So if we're going to see a barrier to electrification, it's not the EEC, which is declining because there is more volume of sales. And so if you have a budget that's remaining relatively constant and you have more sales, the EEC rate itself goes down. I think this has tremendous benefit to
We got a question?
Yeah, well, it's just still the same amount of money. It's kind of like property taxes. It works in the same way. If you have the same amount of budget, but your property increases, your rate's gonna go down just to fund that same pot of money.
But your volumetric charge, your volumetric usage is not likely to change drastically. As a whole, the volume of sales across the state have changed. Your individual use is for most people stayed relatively constant. As you electrify, certainly.
Yeah.
But that is offset by other savings elsewhere. And again, it's the policy of the state of Vermont to be supporting electrification.
Okay, so your testimony is, as we use more electricity, the rate has gone down to fund the budget. The budget is adjusted annually based on
On a 3-year planning cycle.
yeah, okay, a specified set of criteria. But, yeah, I mean, if I'm using more, if the rate's gone down, all I know, it's like your property tax, the bill went up, I don't care.
Sure, but the bill that's going up, right, the reason your bill going up
Is
is
because
of
I'm
electrical.
using more,
Well, because your electric rate went up and you're
Yeah.
using more of that electric rate.
Right.
Rather than your EC.
and, yeah. Originally, we were trying to get you to use less, so your rate would come down, now we want you to use more. I think what we've had for 20 years or more is a program where people knew what the budget was based on and what the rate was based on. I think the concern is now that's not as clear, that it sounds like the rate could go up. I mean,
Not likely.
okay,
Not-
and I
not
think
as likely.
that's the reassurance that people are looking, because it's not clear what, I mean, it's been tied to inflation, and that could get to be pretty significant.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to address that. I think
Okay,
the intent of Senator Watson was to, just as in the original phase of the creation of Efficiency Vermont, when there was concern about what it could mean for the cost for Vermonters, the budget was capped in statute for a period of time, while an understanding of the usage of those dollars were understood to see where the balance was for Vermonters. And then you chose to allow the PUC to set that moving forward. This, to my understanding, was a desire to set that cap. If the inflation adjustment piece is the concern, then I'm like, that to me is an insignificant factor in the overall effort. I think the goal was to make clear what the cost, that this wasn't going to drive up costs for Vermonters. This wasn't an attempt to expand both the function and also the budget at the same time.
okay, so everybody likes flexibility, or many do, efficiency utility. We could cap the budget for X number of years and then have somebody make the decision as to, based on the impact of this extension for your flexibility, make the decision once we have some data under our belts. Would that work?
I mean, I think this was the change that was made in Senate Natural Resources and Energy was there was a period of time where the budget was set in the initial introduction of the bill, was determined to keep it in perpetuity so that it was clear that it wasn't just, this wasn't as Louis mentioned, a sort of attempt to go back in for more resources in the future.
So where did the discussion about rising with inflation go?
That was in the initial bill, and I would defer to some members of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. There wasn't a significant discussion
Okay,
on that.
so right now the budget is capped forever.
Yes. which is the way you did it at the beginning of the creation of efficiency.
Okay, so
So
it
it's-
would take an act of the legislature at this point
Correct,
to increase the budget.
correct.
Okay. That is helpful. Senator Brown.
To make sure I understand what you said, the budget is capped. Can you define what you mean by that?
The budget cannot increase beyond what is, as is written in the current bill. It's uses the 2026 PUC approved budget as the baseline year.
Mhm.
It includes the inflation adjuster. And and so essentially tick up slightly over the course of time, but in real dollars, it would stay flat.
So it basically, yeah, I noticed it was based on the inflation adjustment and it's based on 26 and it will never change beyond that.
Until you determine that you want to do something else with it, or you want to lower it, you know, whatever that looks like, that was an intent to be very clear that as you're thinking about the newness of this change, it's prudent to have some belt and suspenders and not, right? Because some of the early concern presented in Senate Natural Resources and Energy that there might be a reason to that the budget would expand. And I think it's important to signal to Vermonters that this is driving additional greenhouse gas work without additional cost.
Okay. The inflator then is on the budget as it is now. Is there an inflator on the budget?
As I said, every 3 years we come in to propose a bill. We proposed for the 24 to 26 period that we're in now, we proposed a modest 2% inflation adjustment from the previous period in order to account for the fact that everything costs more.
But this is not built into the law that you will
No.
automatically, you will have to go
No.
back to the PUC and make the case that you
Correct.
have saved this much. Okay. And PUC's testimony was, and maybe we need to do some wordsmithing. They weren't clear what they were gonna base that on, so I think there were 4 different things and.
I have been in this job for 3 years. I've been working in this building for a lot longer than that. This is the most confusing underlying statute I have ever seen. And there are some more. There are some more.
Like this.
There's some work done to improve that and in the version that came out of Senate Natural Resources and Energy to try to make clear what the PUC chose to do.
Not before midnight. You can go home. We'll bring it up tomorrow.
Are we saying something that I'm sure?
Depends on how quickly we can resolve this.
Nope. Good.
I did want to speak to the innovation and partnership that we have with not only the distribution utilities, but the PUC and the department. And frankly, you all as well. You've asked us over the last 5 years to help schools improve their indoor air quality. You've asked us to help with victims of the 23 and 24 flooding respond and get back into new equipment. You've asked us to help do additional weatherization and electric panel upgrades and everything else through ARPA dollars. We've stood up and been happy to be part of that work. We also, as I've mentioned, we work very closely with the distribution utilities on programs now. In 2015, when you created the renewable energy standard, as been discussed, and Tier 3 was created, and there was testimony in support of that bill that says we needed competition in the marketplace to be able to most efficiently drive that change. We worked very closely together with the distribution utilities to create shared programs so it's seamless to customers what they're getting. I don't see that changing with this process. It's still a voluntary process to engage that. It's certainly something we would want to see continue because it helps enable a seamless and better experience for Vermonters.
Okay, so this idea that you are now going to go out and you are going to have EV incentives that would be in competition with the utilities incentives that kind of required to have under Tier 3. You'd probably be better off if you pulled your money and gave a really good.
That's exactly what happens with heat pumps right now.
Okay,
And so as you go and have a heat pump installed, your contractor will go to an FW Web or a Granite Group or one of the suppliers,
what he did,
and that price will already come off the top of your bill from,
that's what he told me.
yep. And
It was still a frightening bill.
it's still a lot of money. I won't, yes, but that incentive, Granite Group or
Yeah.
FW Web then invoices Efficiency Vermont. And we figure out which
Yep.
utility is associated with that, and we invoice them for their share of the.
Yep.
It's happening now, that partnership, that ability to move beyond competition and into
And it
cooperation.
was nice because I
Happening.
was sitting, whose website do I have to get on? Where do I find?
Right,
And I'm all set to do it. And he says, oh, no, it's already come off. the
point
net."
of sale rebates are
It was.
exactly where we would love for most of the system to operate.
Yeah.
It is best when we can combine all the things at once, so that you don't have multiple different experiences along.
Okay. Okay, so
I do want to speak to the timing of this. So as I mentioned, we are in the middle of it's 2025. The performance period for EBT is 2020, or for all the EUs is 2024 through 2026. We begin planning for 27 through 29 this summer. We will submit that plan in December of this year. It will get 9 months of thorough review in front of the PUC, working with the Public Service Department, who, you know, as the ratepayer advocate, will query and ask questions and drive us to do more and do better. And the PUC will ultimately determine what is appropriate and approve a plan. And then starting in the beginning of 27, we will start to implement that plan. So if you want to wait to make changes, you will lose a 3-year planning cycle.
okay,
And so we're talking about really making changes from 2030 to 2032 at that point. We had challenges with the Energy Efficiency Modernization Act, understanding of how the second phase of that process was going to work, such that we had to go back to you for additional changes last year in the middle of the budget process. And it was not helpful. It meant that we stopped relationship with contractors. It meant we stopped relationship with suppliers, that we then had to rebuild trust again. It doesn't make any sense to do this in a way that creates further disjointed nature.
If we were to wait a year to make the changes, why could we not extend the present cycle for a year? Or why could we not create a new 3-year cycle beginning a year?
I think since you determine what the PUC does, you have the ability to do that for sure. That definitely would, we would have to figure out what that continued would look like, and I can't really speak to how what the impact would be now.
okay, keep going.
The point on electrification has a range of costs. The department, who you will hear from shortly, did an evaluation of the costs of compliance of the renewable energy standard. And on like a net consideration, the electrification driven by Tier 3, and which again, we're helping with that process, is actually driving down overall compliance costs with RES, and therefore positively affecting electric costs for Vermonters. And so again, we have to, think about all these things together. But overall, there is a value in electrification in terms of more volume to spread the fixed costs of maintaining wires and poles across greater cities.
Yeah, we've had a lot of wires and poles. Yeah.
We have had a lot of wires and
Maybe
poles.
why the rates are part of why the rates are. Plus a lot of investment, things like that and storage. Okay.
So one of the things that I think is most important is our mission is to save Vermonters money, Vermont businesses. Nobody takes on projects that aren't economically in their favor. Right? They may have a value proposition that they want to pursue that's not related to economics, but it sure makes it easier when they get a break in the process. So we're not out in people's homes saying you must do this because we need to achieve energy savings. We're putting a carrot in front of people and allowing them to adopt those technologies and those projects themselves. I think the work that you have in front of you in terms of the SFT5 on the low and moderate income front is really important. To speak, Senator Brock, to your question about what the cost effectiveness test and what that means. What it means from at least from my reading of it is right now we have an 11% low income spending requirement for the EC. So we provide money to do multifamily weatherization projects and other things through those dollars.
Okay, so when this says 25%,
But that's for low and moderate income.
Moderate.
Yeah.
that is, I guess it sounds good when we get to this. 25% of what? Because right now, 11% is going to help with electrification, weatherization.
No, to go to low income spending.
Low income people. Okay, but a lot of weatherization's going on, a lot of, we put money in for solar panels and. Is this 25% for carbon emissions on top of or inclusive of the 11%? So 11%.
So my read is it replaces the 11%, but I want to be clear that
I think we need to be
I
clear.
think I want to step back maybe a moment to your question, to your broader questions and comments. The change that this highlights is in how Efficiency Vermont and Burlington Electric pick the measures. And by measures, I mean equipment and projects that we support and what values they have for the 10 different priorities we have now. So if we think about the measures that we pick, some might have great overall energy savings, but they might drive up winter peak. So we have to balance that with projects that we're going to lower winter peak, because that's one of the metrics we have
Okay,
to
if I
balance.
say you work with the utilities when you make these decisions,
We are regulated by the PUC. All of those measures are
Okay.
approved as part of our work. And we have review, and all of those things are measured based on established standards. As you were asking questions about greenhouse gases and how they're measured, there are approved methods for doing that the Public Service Department and the PUC have worked on over the years to balance different things, to update as you go, to make sure that as we're learning, we can understand what how the values change based on how something is actually being used.
okay.
But those things are well established and would not be a challenge associated.
And in all of this, the PUC remains in the driver's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so as you're thinking about, sort of the speed at which this is moving, you have a limited period of time as the legislature to move important legislation. This was given a month's worth of consideration in Senate Natural Resources and Energy. And after it, if it leaves here, it still has to go through the remainder of the Senate and spend some time upstairs with the House.
Yep.
After that, as I just described, it has 18 months of regulatory process to determine what the actual impact looks like for Vermonters and how we implement it. This is not a tomorrow change. This is going to start to have implications for 2027, not for as soon as it goes into effect.
What it took them a month to do, we have had right now 3.5 hours to understand.
You skipped the governor in your path. It's gotta go.
Yes, no,
Sorry, we've all been in this room breathing decreased oxygen for a little while.
yes. Well, and I'm going to ask the next set of witnesses what their time frame is, because if this committee has been here since 1 o'clock. If I give them a 10-15 minute break, can you do that? Yeah, okay. All right, and Matt, we are not taking up the fuel dealership, just if that makes any difference to you, because we don't control.
Thanks. I know.
I said at the beginning of the meeting, I thought you were all here.
I still like 30 seconds.
Okay, so, okay,
I will leave it there. The committee's been here long enough. I think you are making a modest change. You're making a reiteration of current policy that you've had long established. You will have lots of smart people working on how to implement this. In the end, you will be driving additional greenhouse gas work without raising costs per.
Be clear, you would not be against what the chair is asking about with the auto increment inflation adjusted budget increase.
I think that sounds prudent to me. That
Drop
it just is more confusing than anything.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Are you saying getting rid of that language?
It sounds like it's already,
I
it
would,
doesn't automate, there's a set rate for 3 years. And then when they go in with their new budget, they ask for.
well, this would just keep the rate flat or the budget flat or until you take additional action or forever, whichever comes first.
Or we just, if it starts with your 3-year contract,
Yeah, so
January,
it's based on something.
yeah, then after 3 years, there is an automatic check back.
I would leave it flat.
Okay.
You are making a change that has clearly caused some level of discomfort,
Yeah.
which I don't think is as bad as it
Okay.
is, but that's my perspective and others are available to their own. If you're going to do that, it's always prudent to make sure that there's a stopgap in place to make sure that things don't change drastically. And I'm fully comfortable with that.
Okay. Yes. Just thinking about things changing drastically. This field seems to be not in anybody's eyesight, but there are things that could change very drastically and could keep us here our toes a lot longer, but I don't think so far this is going to be one of these. Okay, I'm going to give us. I was thinking 10. If we open the door and get some oxygen, it will help. We haven't been this proud in a long time. And give everybody just a chance to stretch